I started my first teaching job, eager to make an impression, but still so impressionable myself. I was hired at one of those special needs schools where the students call everyone by their first name. The high school was a small part of a probation program, including an all-boys residential facility and a network of social services. If a student couldn't be successful in the school or the dormitory, he was terminated from the program and sent back to juvenile hall. One day, we were trained to identify and de-escalate problematic situations like aggressive behavior, gang-related triggers, power struggles. Day 2, we were taught to physically break up a fight. Even a small petite woman like me could assist in pulling apart 2 large 17-year-olds using this method. The key was to mitigate the problem before it became one. And most important, remember to maintain appropriate boundaries. You are not the social worker. You are not their friend. You are their teacher, nothing more and nothing less. Early on, I stuck to these rules like a good company employee. At 22, my students were only a few years younger than me, and with my stature, I looked like a teenager. "Hey, miss, how old are you?" they would ask. "Old enough to be your teacher," I'd respond defiantly. I was a cold-hearted bitch during those early years. I had to build my street cred, earn respect, show these kids that they couldn't mess with me. Sometimes I envied the more seasoned teachers, the ones that could put their arm around a student without raising any eyebrows and skillfully tread the fine line between teacher, mentor, and friend. I had many difficult students during those early years. Mason was tall and lengthy white kid with braces and an awkward face, the kind of face only a mother would love. He was 16 when he entered my classroom. Mason's mother was a meth addict. He had been raised by his grandfather, who wanted nothing to do with him after he threatened to burn down her house. She couldn't control his impulsive and disturbing behavior. Mason laid low in my classroom for the first week. One day, we were reading "This Is Just to Say" by William Carlos Williams. It's a modern poem that reads like a note on the refrigerator. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums. They were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. I asked the class, "What did you think of this poem?" "That's not a poem," someone said angrily. "That's not a poem." Mason was sitting near my desk. Our classrooms were small. I had 8 students in that lit class, their desk chairs arranged haphazardly around the whiteboard. "It's just some notes someone wrote. Could have written this." I looked over at Mason and suddenly noticed there was blood on his hands. I stood confounded, my mouth open. It took me a minute to realize that he had taken a paper clip from my desk and was piercing his ear. "Nobody move," I insisted sternly. I reached for some tissue and handed it to Mason. "Get up and go to the nurse's office now." My voice was on the verge of trembling. "But I didn't finish my other ear." "No!" A few weeks after that, we were turning in essays. One of the kids had asked for a stapler, so they passed it around to staple their papers. When it got to Mason, he was intrigued by the stapling mechanism. He snapped it open and closed. Before I could react, he snapped the gun one more time and slammed it against his forearm, stapling himself. The next week, he tried to give himself a tattoo with a sharp pencil. There were no school supplies that were safe around him. If I handed him out paper, he'd probably slit his wrist with tiny paper cuts. Every incident like that had to be written up and documented. And there were only other problems in the dorms. He had the word liability written all over him. One day, he stopped by my homeroom after school to get an assignment he had missed. I was clumsily trying to pare an apple with a plastic knife. "Why don't you just bite the apple?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "I just like apples this way. My mom always cut them up for me, and for some reason, it tastes better." "Want one?" I offered. He sat down and took a slice. He said, chewing loudly. It's good like this. He smiled that goofy grin of his. My mom never did anything like that for me, he said, looking down. I hate her. He was barely audible. I looked at him. Have you talked to your social worker about this? I asked, trying to maintain my teacher boundaries. They're supposed to be psychologists. They're supposed to know what's going on in my head, but they don't know. One of these days, they're going to find me in my room hung up with my sheets or something. I felt like he had punched me in the gut. Mason, why did you tell me that? You know I'm going to have to write that up. I know, he shrugged. He shoved his chair back and walked over to my desk. There was a small bottle of cucumber melon hand lotion that I kept there. He picked it up and sniffed it deeply. I like girly smelling stuff, he said. You know what? Go ahead and take it. Really? Yeah, but you have to promise to be good this week. No AWOLs and don't hurt yourself. I want to see you here on Monday. Okay, I'll be good, he promised. On Monday morning, I was informed that Mason was on termination warning. One more wrong move and he would be sent back to juvenile hall. His grandmother had come to visit him, and after she left, he started a fight in the rec room. During class, while I was writing some notes on the board, I heard Mason tell one of his peers that he would run away if he was ever called to social services. The running joke is that being called to social services means a white van is waiting to take you back to juvenile hall. It's one of those jokes that make everyone uncomfortable because it's partially true. Somebody, tell me what we discussed yesterday, I said. Reluctantly, they sat up, ever so slowly shuffling their notes. Anyone out there? I said. Mason stood up and went up to the whiteboard. I'm listening, miss, he said eagerly. I'll write on the whiteboard for you. He towered above me when he wasn't sitting at his desk. The old Ed. Well, I guess I'll have the class just with Mason today, I teased, knowing how to manipulate them. There was a chorus of dissent. No, I'm paying attention too. And suddenly, this group of former gangbangers and juvenile offenders were all interested in the rise of modernism. They were like Mason, desperate for attention. The bell rang, and as they were leaving, Mason turned to me and said, "Thanks, miss. You make me feel special." He reached his arms around my waist and lifted me in a bear hug. His face was inches from mine. Then he gently placed me back on my feet. I was taken aback, a bit flustered. "Get out of here," I said, embarrassed. I gave him a rare smile and watched him walk out. Fourth period rushed in and consumed me. Then lunch. Sometimes life seemed to push you right along. When you stop for a moment and look back, you can see that all the signs were there, but then you look ahead and all ran right by you. At 3 p.m., as the boys lined up to shuffle back to the dorms, I heard one of them say, "Did you hear? That white kid from A dorm got T-rolled." "Yeah, I saw the van. I heard he tried to run." My heart sank. They were talking about Mason. "Wasn't that your student, Kara?" my TA asked. I said, trying to sound unconcerned. "Could be him." "That's too bad," she said. "I guess he got terminated. He was a real nut job." And that was that. He was gone. From that day, I obsessed about him. I grieved over Mason as if I was mourning his death. I went into his confidential school file and read everything in it. Psychological assessments, testing scores, police reports, everything. What was I looking for? I found a Polaroid of him taken on his first day. He had a scowl on his face. That face only a mother could love. I learned about his dorm staff that he was being detained at Silmar, a juvenile facility located in the valley. You can see its cement walls and barbed wire fencing from Interstate 5 on your way to Magic Mountain. That is, if you know it's there. Soon after, I had a dream that I had devised an elaborate operation to break him out. I was dressed in all black and slinking along the walls. You could hear the theme to Mission Impossible playing in the background. When I got to his cell, he said, What are you doing? What was I doing? Did I think that I was some kind of superhero? After all the dorm counselors, his social workers, his grandmother couldn't do for him, did I really think that I could be a savior? I needed closure. I needed to know that I had done everything I could do for him, even in my helplessness. I needed to know that I was a good teacher. I decided to write him a letter. The kind of letter that you write to an ex-boyfriend or a lover, one who has passed away. The kind of letter that you write but don't send. In the letter, I told him how special he had been to me and encouraged him to be hopeful. I told him all the things I had wanted to tell him when he was a student, but couldn't because I was only his teacher. And then, impulsively, I mailed it. Every day, I checked the mail and mentally tallied the days. Did he get my letter? What did he think of it? Will he write back? Did his probation officer find it? Will I get fired? How can I make it stop? Soon after, I had another dream. I was teaching a class and heard Mason's voice. "What are we doing today?" he said. I turned around perplexed. "I thought you were gone." He looked at me from his desk and smiled that goofy grin of his. "I've been here the whole time," he said.